Selective Populism. It's the 13th of 14 characteristics of Ur-Fascism by Umberto Eco. Let's get into it. Ur-Fascism is based upon a selective populism, a qualitative populism, one might say. In a democracy, the citizens have individual rights, but the citizens in their entirety have a political impact only from a quantitative point of view. One follows the decisions of the majority. For Ur-Fascism, however, individuals have no rights, and the people is conceived as a quality, a monolithic entity expressing the common will. Since no large quantity of human beings can have a common will, the leader pretends to be their interpreter. Having lost their power of delegation, citizens do not act. They are only called upon to play the role of the people. Thus, the people is only a theatrical fiction. To have a good instance of qualitative populism, we no longer need the Piazza Venezia in Rome or the Nurnberg Stadium. There is in our future a TV or internet populism in which the emotional response of a selected group of citizens can be presented and accepted as the voice of the people. So, of course, we are going to take a look at what the Piazza Venezia in Rome and the Nuremberg Stadium have in common. This is a blog post, so I'm not claiming it as hard news, but it does, Beppe Castro is the author of this, but it does give us a few images of the Piazza Venezia and the surrounding areas. And essentially what this is the gathering place for Mussolini, the fascist of Italy of the early 30s. Now, just as a little aside, the blogger also talked a little bit about these talking statues, and the talking statues in Rome have been used for political discourse for more than 500 years. And they're worth tracking down if you're gonna go visit. But it's interesting. So it said that the Roman citizens since the 16th century would post anonymous messages with a strongly satirical, humorous, or provocative tone, attributing to the statue's ability to speak in the name of ordinary people. The main targets of these protests were the politicians of the day. So one example of this is down here. The political protests in the form of messages were hung around the neck of the statue during the night. An example of a popular criticism in the 17th century of Pope Urban VIII Barberini was, "What the barbarians did not do, the Barberini did." This type of biting satire continues today as the statue continues to be the display for complaints against Romans. And then I believe this is the one, Madama Lucrezia, is the one that is the closest to the piazza that we were discussing. So I just find it interesting that even in a fascist regime, there are ways for the people to have a voice. Now, these are pictures of the piazza in Rome during the time of Mussolini. The stage for the regime, its rights and its protagonists during the final war years, the Vittoriano protected the civil population of Rome in its basement. The fascist regime, 1922 to 1943, appropriated the Vittoriano, fully grasping its architectural, artistic, and scenographic qualities, but transforming it into a cog in its rhetoric and propaganda machine. From a symbol of unity and liberty, the monument was reduced to being the backdrop for the military parades that took place along the Via dell'Impero, today's Via dei Fori Imperiali, and for the speeches given by Benito Mussolini from the balcony of the Palazzo Venezia. Now, the Nuremberg Stadium, which is in Germany, this is an image of the stadium, and this is an image of prisoners of the Nazis using these heavy boulders to build the rally grounds. We're going to take a little bit more of an in-depth look at the concentration camp system as a backdrop for where we are headed today. This article comes from the Holocaust Encyclopedia, And I'm going to start over here. German authorities under National Socialism established a variety of detention facilities to confine those whom they defined as political, ideological, or racial opponents of the regime. In time, their extensive camp system came to include concentration camps where persons were incarcerated without observation of the standard norms applying to arrest and custody, labor camps, prisoner of war camps, transit camps, and camps which served as killing centers, also often called extermination camps or death camps. In the earliest years of the Third Reich, various central, regional, and local authorities in Germany established concentration camps to detain political opponents of the regime, including German communists, socialists, trade unionists, and others from left and liberal political circles. In the spring of 1933, the SS established Dachau concentration camp, which came to serve as a model for an expanding and centralized concentration camp system under SS management. During camp administration, during 1934, Reichsfuhrer, SS or SS chief, Heinrich Himmler centralized those camps that held prisoners under orders of protective custody under an agency called the Inspectorate of Concentration Camps. Himmler appointed Dachau concentration camp commander Theodor Eicke as chief of the IKL. In 1939, Richard Glucks replaced Eicke as the inspector of concentration camps. He held this position until 1945. Subordinate to the SS main office from 1934 until 1939, and the SS operations main office from 1939 until 1942, the IKL became a department of the SS Economic Administrative Main Office in March of 1942. This move corresponded to Himmler's decision to engage concentration camp labor more intensively in support of the German war effort. So people were imprisoned that led to a war that they then had to labor to support the war efforts of the people who were imprisoning them. Named for the insignia they wore on their uniform collar lapels, the SS Death's Head units, later called SS Death's Head battalions, and eventually regiments, commanded, administered, and guarded the concentration camps. Subordinated to the IKL, these units came to be renowned for their cruelty. The German security police had exclusive responsibility for arrest, as well as orders for incarceration, release, execution, or other official disciplinary punishment. The security police was incorporated into the Reich Main Office for Security, along with the SS Security Service in 1939. It consisted of two branches of the pre-Nazi police detective forces: the German political police detective agencies, centralized and renamed the Secret State Police, Gestapo, in 1934, investigated politically motivated crime, while the criminal police detective agencies, centralized in 1936 to 1937, investigated crime that lacked apparent political motive. So two arms of the police states, one for political opponents and one for non-political opponents, outside the laws of the German state. The IKL, however, was responsible for the concentration camp prisoner from the moment he or she entered the camp until the moment he or she died in the camp or was released. The camp commandant and the SS Death's Head battalion personnel were responsible for constant, unofficial cruelty that often led and was intended to lead to unofficial killings. These deaths each had to be reported to the security police. They were routinely written up as suicides, accidental deaths, and justified killings of prisoners who were trying to escape, assaulting a guard, sabotaging production, or inciting prisoners to revolt. The camp authorities also reported murders as deaths from acute illness, such as weak heart or interruption of circulation. From 1933, the concentration camp system, including its prisoners and its guards, was not subject to review by any judicial or administrative authorities outside of the SS and police apparatus. Based on an extra-legal jurisdiction authorized by Hitler as Führer, the concentration camp literally stood outside the laws of the German state. It was intended to serve as a detention center for persons whom the Nazi leaders deemed to be a subversive danger to the German race. Incarceration in a concentration camp was rarely linked to a specific crime or actual subversive activity. The SS and police ordered incarceration based on their suspicion that an individual person either had committed a crime or engaged in subversive activity, or would likely commit a crime or engage in a subversive activity in the future. So basically, in the concentration camps, you could get thrown in there for pretty much any reason or no reason at all, and there was nobody outside of the SS watching. Who was incarcerated? Hence, individuals could be incarcerated in concentration camps indefinitely. 1, without ever being charged of a specific act. 2, after having been acquitted on charges related to a specific crime. 3, upon release from prison after serving a sentence handed down by a German court for a specific act. So after they'd already served their time, they could be arrested again, put into concentration camp. Or 4, or because the SS and police authorities deemed that individual, often on the basis of alleged racial inferiority or alleged racial-driven hostility to Germany was a danger to German society. So basically, if you were of a race that they didn't like, you could be thrown in. After the SS leadership, I'm going to go back here. You could basically be thrown in for any number of reasons, but most specifically, they often were thrown into concentration camps for being political opponents. So let us take a look at what that might look like today.
He's making headlines because he's pledging and has pledged on social media to prosecute political opponents. His threats are related to false claims that the 2020 election was stolen, something he admitted didn't happen even last week. Now some of those threats are saying he's going to punish, prosecute, and jail for long terms anyone involved in the 2024 election if he's unhappy with the result.
So we already have some evidence that President Trump is intending to go after his political opponents. And if he were to follow the fascist playbook, he would be able to throw them in concentration camps or prisons simply for being political opponents because they might sometime in the future pose a threat. After the SS leadership, with Hitler's blessing, detached the pre-Nazi police detective forces from state administrative and judicial oversight in the years 1933 to 36, only the centralized SS and police authorities could determine who was a danger to the German race and order the incarceration of such persons in a concentration camp. For persons perceived to be political and racial opponents of the Reich, the Gestapo issued protective custody orders, which authorized the incarceration in camps of Jews, Social Democrats, Communists, Liberals, Freemasons, Jehovah's Witnesses, clergy who opposed the Nazis, members of the national opposition movements, non-Germans in general, after Germany began to occupy Europe, and any others whose behavior, real or perceived, could be interpreted as politically motivated opposition. So already we see here some hints that a lot of the power was becoming was becoming more centralized, so that only the SS and police authorities could make these calls. A little bit like President Trump, who has recently issued an executive order stating that only he and the Attorney General have the authority to interpret the law.
Lastly, we have another executive order that President Trump signed relating to independent agencies. This executive order would establish important oversight functions in the Office of Management and Budget and its subsidiary office, OIRA, supervising independent agencies and many of their actions, and also reestablishes the longstanding norm that only the President or the Attorney General can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to what the law is.
Okay, that is not a long-standing norm, and that is not legal. For persons whose real or perceived behavior or actions were considered criminal but non-political in nature, or socially deviant, so as to create a so-called danger to German society, the criminal police often issued preventative arrest orders. Under these orders, which were often motivated more by racial and social prejudice than by actual criminal violations, Roma and Sinti, who are gypsies, so-called asocials, repeat criminal offenders, gay men, and so-called security suspects were incarcerated in the concentration camps. Although the language of these arrest orders contained limits on the time during which a prisoner could be incarcerated, in practice, incarcerations were routinely extended indefinitely, which means once you go in, you will never come out alive. After World War II began, Himmler forbade in general the release of concentration camp prisoners for the duration of the war. Source of forced labor. In addition to serving as detention centers for persons deemed to be of danger to the Reich, the concentration camp system served two other key purposes of the Nazi regime. First, corresponding to a close relationship between the Inspectorate of Concentration Camps and the business and administrative offices of the SS, the camps were to be the source of inexpensive forced labor for SS-owned or operated businesses. After 1938 and well into World War II, concentration camp labor was deployed in producing construction materials for actual SS-managed construction projects, including the expansion of existing camps and the construction of new camps, which is like heinous to me that they could force concentration camp prisoners to build new concentration camps to house new prisoners. In exceptional cases, concentration camp prisoners were leased to private firms such as the IG Farben synthetic fuel and rubber plants established in 1941 in Monowitz in Upper Silesia near the Auschwitz concentration camp. After the incorporation of the camps into the WHVA in 1942, the SS increasingly engaged concentration camp prisoners in producing for the German war effort, deploying them, still under the SS Guard, to German state-owned firms and private firms, which compensated the SS for increasingly scarce labor. We're going to come back to this when we talk a little bit about what is happening right now with forced detention of migrants. So keep that in mind. Systematic murder. The concentration camps standing outside the reach of the German justice authorities had always been places where the SS could kill prisoners. After the beginning of the war, however, the camps increasingly became sites for the systematic murder of individuals or small groups of persons. Such groups included Soviet prisoners of war selected by the Gestapo officials as particularly dangerous, members of national resistance groups, persons deemed by the criminal police or Kripo to be particularly violent criminals, groups of partisans, real or perceived, night and fog prisoners from Western Europe. And the night and fog were essentially the SS would go into homes that they believed had people they wanted, and under the cover of night and fog, those people would disappear and never be seen again. Polish or Soviet civilian forced laborers in Germany who were then alleged to have had sexual relations with German women or to have committed a violent crime. So basically, if you weren't German but you were having relations with German women, that made you a deviant. And recaptured U.S. and British military officers who had escaped from prisoner of war camps and were to be killed under the provisions of the so-called Bullet Decree of 1944. Such prisoners, like the European Jews who were murdered upon arrival in the gas chambers of the killing centers, were never officially registered as prisoners, but were killed usually within 24 hours of arrival. Recognizing the increasing numbers of these small-scale killing operations, and because they needed an efficient way to kill prisoners who had become too weak to work, the SS authorities equipped several concentration camps with gas chambers, during 1941 and 42. Even before the war, the camp system expanded with the construction of the major camps of Sachsenhausen, Buchenwald near Weimar, Flossenburg, Mauthausen, the women's concentration camp, Ravensbrück, Auschwitz, 1940, which would later also serve as a killing center, Nachtweiler in Alsace. As the need for prisoner labor increased, especially after the beginning of World War II, the SS authorities in these major camps established satellite camps. Buchenwald, for example, had 88 satellite camps or sub-camps by the end of war in 1945. Some satellite camps, like Gross-Rosen and Neuengamme, both sub-camps of Sachsenhausen, grew so large that they became concentration camps in their own right. Expanding prisoner populations. Most prisoners in the early concentration camps represented real or perceived political opponents of the regime. However, as time went on, the prisoner population expanded to include ideological and religious dissenters, such as Jehovah's Witnesses and dissident members of the clergy. And that one scares me, because let me just tell you, I know a lot of clergy, and all of the clergy that I know are dissidents. They would all be part of the resistance if we were organized as such today. The prisoner population also expanded to include individuals whose behavior did not comply with existing social norms, such as gay men, the work shy, which are basically just people they deem to be too lazy to work, vagrants, other so-called asocials, and Roma, who are the gypsies, who to the Nazi leaders represented at once an alien racial and criminal element on German soil. Habitual criminals were also incarcerated in concentration camps beginning in 1930s, often after they had served their legitimate sentences in prison. What we're seeing now is this move to go back to a time when people like gay men or lesbian women or transgendered people or anybody in the LGBTQ plus community, they would all be considered these asocials. There is no question in my mind that we are right now moving back to a time when anybody who is in the LGBTQ plus IA plus community would be considered a deviant under these norms and rules. Right now, it is not illegal to be gay or to be trans, but there are laws being introduced in certain states that would, for example, ban sodomy. And if you are a gay man married to another gay man, there would be a really strong case that you were engaging in such a thing, therefore could be imprisoned simply for being who you are. After the Kristallnacht, or Night of Crystal, more commonly known as Night of Broken Glass, pogroms in November 1938, and that was a night when the SS just went into communities and just devastated communities, and it was called Night of Crystal because of all of the glass that littered the streets after they came and just took masses of people. The police officials conducted mass arrests of adult male Jews and imprisoned them in camps such as Dachau, Buchenwald, and Sachsenhausen. The particularly brutal treatment of Jews in the concentration camps served as further impetus for German and Austrian Jews to emigrate. The outbreak and expansion of war radically altered the makeup and composition of the concentration camp system. The camp population expanded dramatically with the arrival of foreign forced laborers, foreign political opponents, and resistance fighters, and prisoners of war. Implementation of the final solution. Before the general deportation of Jews out of the so-called Greater German Reich began in October 1941, the burgeoning prisoner population of many concentration camps on German soil inspired some of the initial prisoner selections. SS doctors and so-called euthanasia functionaries conducted these selections. Beginning in spring of 1941, German officials sent ill and exhausted prisoners from Dachau, Sachsenhausen, Buchenwald, Mauthausen, Flossenburg, Gross-Rosen, Niederhaugen, Neuengamme, Ravensbrück, and Auschwitz to their deaths at various euthanasia killing centers. Under the auspices of Operation 14F13, the extension of the so-called euthanasia program to the concentration camp system. During World War II, Nazi doctors also performed medical experiments on prisoners in some camps. Experiments to test pharmaceuticals and medical treatments, formulate rescue and survival strategies for Axis troops in the field, devise efficient and economic methods of mass sterilization, and underpin Nazi racial and anti-Semitic theories, claim the health and lives of thousands of concentration camp prisoners. I do believe today I hope today we are past the point of doing such incredibly unethical medical practices. But even at the time, that would have been frowned upon. If you're doing all of these things in secret, if you're doing all of these things and nobody can see what's happening, then you can pretty much get away with anything if nobody is looking. So why is this important? For one, if we rewrite history, if we forget history, it's a lot easier to reenact history, to repeat history, or rhyme history, as some have said. But the other thing is that we have so long in our country, in my time, in my generation, believed that these were things of the past, that concentration camps were something that happened back then and not something that could happen now. But we're wrong, because concentration camps are occurring now, and we may not be calling them concentration camps, although I don't think that we're that far off from starting to call them that anyway. But we do have concentration camps, and I'm going to build my case for that momentarily. This is an opinion piece, so I'm not claiming to be hard, fast news, but I think it does have an interesting perspective on deportation plans and concentration camps. And this was written in July of 2024, so this was prior to the election. But it's got a lot of very eerie predictions about things that could happen if President Trump was elected, and some of the things that we are seeing happen now. Trump's massive deportation plan echoes concentration camp history. Trump's language about immigrants poisoning the U.S. repeats past rhetoric that led to civilian detention camps with horrific, tragic results. The Republican National Convention hit rock bottom on its third day in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on July 17th with a sea of signs calling for mass deportation now. And mass deportation does not just mean deporting a lot of people. Mass deportation refers to a strategy for deporting, for going into raiding businesses, homes, schools, churches, and systematically eliminating from the country all of the people, all of the migrants, not just a lot of them. If former President Donald Trump is elected for a second term, he and his advisors promise to remove from the U.S. via forced expulsions and deportation camps as many as 20 million people, a number larger than the country's current estimated population of undocumented residents. So already back in July of last year, they were planning to deport more people than we had undocumented in the country. What does that mean? That means people who are documented and who are here legally. Put into effect, this scheme would devolve quickly into a vast 21st century version of concentration camps with predictably brutal results. So if you have dehumanized an entire group of people to the point where you have no trouble ripping their families apart and deporting parts of the family or taking entire families, some of whom are legal citizens. If you have no problem doing that to people, if you have dehumanized people to that degree, you are not going to have any problem brutalizing those people if they are imprisoned under your watch. Concentration camps are built for the mass detention of civilians based on group identity, excluding protections normally afforded by a country's legal system. I wrote a history of these camps that traced an arc from their 19th century origins in Spanish-occupied Cuba through the development of death camps in Germany and their modern-day descendants around the world. Trump's plan to launch a massive deportation project nationwide, the first plank in the platform approved at his party's convention, draws on the same flawed historical rationales and pseudoscience that built support for concentration camps worldwide in the 20th century. Early architects of these camps veiled their efforts in scientific terms, while using terror and punishment to seize more power. For example, Trump has claimed repeatedly that undocumented immigrants are poisoning the blood of the U.S. Blood poisoning is a medical condition. Saying that foreigners are poisoning a nation's blood is simply a slur. But perverting scientific or medical language to violate human rights and permit atrocities comes from a familiar playbook. Justifications for brutal immigration policies have often distorted scientific goals of public health programs. Trump and his advisors have long been prone to panic-mongering over the threat of disease from immigrants. They've likewise twisted sociology to stoke anxiety about assimilation, to justify a Muslim ban, or to try to make racist comments seem less objectionable. Even simple principles of statistics get skewered as Trump lies about crime committed by immigrants. Trump's incendiary language echoes dangerous historical precedents. He has called his political opponents vermin, referred to immigrants as depraved animals and rapists, and described the U.S.-Mexico border as an open wound. Examples abound of similar rhetoric in Nazi propaganda about Jews. Less well known is the fact that before World War II, the Nazis framed German Jews as aliens who needed to be forced into emigration or expelled. This was the original logic for stripping Jews of citizenship, to officially render them foreigners. It should be noted that Trump aims to end birthright citizenship in the U.S., and he has already tried to do that. He's being blocked in the courts, thankfully, right now, but that doesn't mean he's going to stop trying. And I also want to highlight this language. So in World War II, the Nazis framed German Jews as aliens. So one of the ways that you allow and encourage these atrocities to happen is that you dehumanize people. You make them less than human. And by calling people aliens, you are dehumanizing them. Let's take a quick look, shall we, at the language on the website of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement under detention facilities. Let's read this aloud, shall we? The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations, ERO mission is to protect the homeland through the arrest and removal of those aliens. There it is. Aliens. On the government website. We're using dehumanizing language. Who undermine the safety of our nation's communities and the integrity of the U.S. immigration laws. To fulfill the agency's critical mission, ERO oversees civil immigration detention in facilities nationwide that house aliens. Prejudice has always been a part of concentration camps. At the dawn of the 20th century, Mortality surged in British camps in southern Africa during the South African War, with children's deaths blamed on uncivilized Boer mothers. Really? We're going to blame mothers for the deaths of their children? Embracing pseudoscientific biology, camp administrators spent about half the money per day for food for a black African civilian, as was spent on white detainees, who themselves received insufficient rations. Bureaucracy and unforeseen crises added immeasurably to the harm. In poorly sited and badly run camps, tens of thousands of non-combatants died. That means civilians. Other early camp systems included massive networks established on an emergency basis to detain immigrants or expel targeted minority groups. During the Spanish Civil War, when 475,000 refugees poured across France's southern border in less than 3 weeks, many were forced into unlivable conditions in remote areas to isolate them from French society. Because we don't want to see those people, do we? Illness and disease followed on a massive scale. After the start of World War II, the French government used those same camps to intern foreign Jews who had escaped Hitler's Germany, detaining them as enemy aliens. So the Jews escaped Hitler's Germany only to be imprisoned by the French. And after France fell to the Nazis, French policemen went door to door in Paris in May 1941 in the service of the Vichy government to round up foreign Jews who remained at liberty. Some deported Jews were sent to barracks, still holding Spanish detainees and enemy aliens. Camps often begin as one thing and become something else. Camps often begin as one thing and become something else. The relocation and detention involved in the deportation project that Trump is proposing are at least an order of magnitude greater than these debacles. The argument that a second Trump administration wouldn't be able to launch such an operation because of lack of personnel or legal authority should be understood as largely irrelevant, because it presupposes the intention of running a precise legal project at all. A professional effort on this scale would be impossible. The mass deportations planned to begin in January 2025 if Trump is reelected, which he was and they are meant to unleash deliberate and collateral mayhem. And if history is any guide, a system of camps built to punish millions represent a threat to every American. Because remember, it may start with the illegal migrants or migrants who are here illegally and undocumented, but they've already tried to remove birthright citizenship, which means going to American citizens. And once any American, whether they're here legally or not, is in danger, all of Americans are in danger. A threat to one is a threat to all. As for what they say they intend, Trump and his allies openly admire the results of the Eisenhower-era Operation W slur, whose very name offers a slur, revealing the endemic prejudice that made it possible. This limited deportation blitz led to the deaths of 88 workers in 112-degree Fahrenheit heat. A new Trump administration would be looking to replicate that operation on a scale heretofore untried, using the largest deportation force ever seen in the U.S., according to both Trump and the former director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Tom Homan. Trump advisor Stephen Miller has described a plan to create vast holding facilities that would function as staging centers. And Trump has promised to remove 4% of the current U.S. population in a deliberate plan to spur a massive disruption of the labor market. If Americans took notice of border policy during Trump's first administration, said Homan earlier this month, they ain't seen shit yet. The mass deportation now signs filling the audience at the Republican National Convention are a grim warning of how much worse the situation could get. Trump, his advisors, the Heritage Foundation, the extreme right platform that has put forth Project 2025, which is now currently being enacted, and countless members of Congress are not only winking and nodding toward detention horrors of the past, but are clearly willing to repeat history if it will let them consolidate power. The U.S. has previously embraced concentration camps during the detention of Japanese Americans during World War II and under the family separation policy imposed during Trump's presidency. The broader legacy of camps on 6 continents offers a panoramic assortment of even more ways in which mass deportations and forced relocation can go wrong. Unleashed on anything close to the scale under discussion, the Trump project and his henchmen, the project Trump and his henchmen are proposing will be lethal to the targeted groups, catastrophic to the stability of the country, and extremely difficult to undo. These camps are in no way scientific or even serious policy. They're the equivalent of dropping a hydrogen bomb to put out a forest fire. This was Opinion Piece written by Andrea Pitzer. I'm going to go back and take a look again at the detention facilities page of U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And you can go here and you can take a look at all of the offices, and there are nearly 100 nationwide of detention facilities. You can look yours up by state if you want to. Honestly, this one makes me kind of ill. This one here with the pretty picture. Look at the pretty picture with all the really nice grass. And I look at one like this one and I go like, what is going on the inside? Because those look like army barracks to me. This one is not an opinion piece. This is a news piece by NBC, and this one is dated November of 2024. So after this was written after the election, but prior to the inauguration. Incoming Trump administration is eyeing new immigrant detention centers near major U.S. cities. The plan would also include restarting the policy of detaining parents with their children, known as family detention, which immigration advocates have criticized. Now, people on the left have family separation policies, and so the solution, according to the right, is not to stop detaining families, but just to detain them together. And they're probably laughing at us as they say, well, at least we're not separating them. The incoming Trump administration is considering locations and talking to private prison companies about drastically expanding immigration detention centers that would hold immigrants before they are deported as a part of President-elect Donald Trump's promised mass deportation plan. 2 sources familiar with planning told NBC News. Now, I want you to think back. Private prison companies. You remember when we were back here talking about the fascist regime of Nazi Germany? Concentration camp prisoners were leased to private firms. So we're already talking about using private prisons to house families of immigrants. The goal is to double the number of immigration and customs enforcement detention beds. 41,000 are now allocated by Congress to hold vast numbers of migrants for short periods of time while they await deportation after their arrest inside the U.S., the sources said. Their plan would also include restarting the policy of detaining parents with their children, known as family detention, which immigration advocates have criticized and the Biden administration stopped in 2021, the sources said. So far, people working on the plans with the Trump transition team are assessing which of the facilities the Biden administration closed could be reopened, taking account of available space in county jails and assessing which areas might need temporary facilities to detain migrants as part of the deportation effort. Trump's transition team is looking at how many migrants each region can hold, including in Democratic-controlled metropolitan areas across the country. A source familiar with the plans said they prioritize areas with large migrant populations that lack detention facilities rather than single out Democratic strongholds. So what they're saying is they're not really looking at the Democratic areas. They're just looking for areas that have lots and lots of immigrants. Where do the immigrants end up to be safe in this country? Yes. Yeah. There you go. Democratic strongholds. Cities with large populations of migrants like Denver, Los Angeles, Miami, and Chicago could need additional detention sites built nearby to hold migrants arrested there. The administration might also need to reopen, expand, or build new facilities in the Northeast to hold migrants arrested around New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, source said. Another source familiar with the plan said so-called sanctuary policies in Democratic cities should not prevent ICE from expanding detention there. The details of the plan open a window into what Trump has promised will be the largest deportation operation in American history. Critics of the plan have said that he would lack the money, staffing, willingness from countries to take back migrants, flights, and detention space to make it a reality. We've already seen that he's been working with the other countries. He's been using private flights, I think, but mostly military cost crazy amounts of money, but what does he care about money? Carolyn Leavitt, a spokeswoman for the transition team, said in a statement, "The American people re-elected President Trump by a resounding margin, giving him a mandate to implement the promises he made on the campaign trail. He will deliver." People, he did not win a mandate. So a mandate is like a directive from the electorate. Colloquially speaking, we use it to describe, like, if you have an overwhelming number of the electorate telling you that they want something, then you do that something, and you say it's because I had a mandate to do so. He does not have a mandate. More than half of the country, about 2/3 of the country, I think, don't quote me on that, do not want this. We do not want this. Two of the largest public traded companies in that industry, in the private prison industry, GEO Group and CoreCivic, have experienced increases in their stock prices. GEO Group and CoreCivic are both publicly traded, and their stocks have increased 69% and 61% respectively since Trump's election victory. Oh, let us take a look at them, shall we? This is the GEO Group. What is it? It is a rehabilitation facility, a global leader in evidence-based rehabilitation. Buckle up, kids. The GEO Group is committed to providing leading evidence-based rehabilitation programs to individuals while in custody and post-release into the community, which means after you've been released into the community, we're still going to be watching you. And if you make a step out of line, we'll just throw you right back in. Through the GEO continuum of care. GEO's diversified services platform provides unique capabilities for the delivery of educational and vocational programs, cognitive behavioral and substance abuse treatment, and faith-based services. Okay, I'm sorry, come again? We're going to require migrants being held in private prisons to undergo faith-based rehabilitation? What could go wrong? The GEO continuum of care is enhanced rehabilitation and reentry programming. What is that? What is that? What is enhanced rehabilitation? Like, if rehabilitation is working, why enhance it? Enhanced. God, that's terrifying. Including cognitive behavioral treatments integrated with post-release support services. Okay, that's the GEO group. Let's take a look at the other one that was listed here, which is core civic. Better the public good. What we do, what we don't do. Okay, our mission. Core Civic is committed to providing high quality, compassionate treatment to all those in our care. Under Core Civic Safety, we operate safe facilities that provide education and effective re-entry programming to help individuals make positive changes so they can return to the community successfully. Under Core Civic Community, we manage transitional centers to help justice-involved individuals. Justice-involved individuals? Who wrote that bullshit? What bureaucrat wrote that down? Prisoners, basically. Prisoners. We're helping justice-involved individuals. See, that's another thing. So when you start flowering up the language, if you start changing the way that the language describes what's happening, it's very easy then to change the narrative, to shift the perception of what is happening. You start by changing the language, and the language itself helps shift the perception. So these transitional centers help justice-involved individuals ease into their new life after incarceration and provide non-residential options like electronic monitoring. Okay, that's so cool. So you don't have to live in their facilities as long as you're willing to wear a bracelet to electronically monitor your every move. Why would they even need that if they've served their terms? I don't know. Okay, well, anyway, that's not my business. Core Civic Properties offers innovative real estate solutions to government, including build-to-suit and flexible lease options. Fuck me. So what they're saying is, if y'all don't have enough detention facilities, come to us. We can custom tailor a build-to-suit and flexible lease option real estate solution for your little justice-involved individual problem. What are detention services? Oh my gosh, look at how beautiful that is. I mean, it looks like a park. Like my kids could play there. Core Civic partners with the U.S. Marshals Service and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to provide safe environments where detainees can reside temporarily as they go through their legal due process. Unfortunately, there is a lot of information about our company and immigration detention. So people are so pissed about this out there in the multiverse that they actually had to put on their website there's a lot of misinformation out there. You can't trust everything your eyes see. You can't trust everything your ears are hearing. Look over there. Here are the facts about detention services at Core Civic. And I did pull this up. I will link this. I'm not going to read the whole entire thing, what we do and what we don't do. But I do want to read this last one, what we do. We provide the flexibility to be able to open and close immigration facilities as needed to meet our government partners' needs, which change rapidly, as inflows of undocumented immigrants can shift by hundreds of thousands of people from one year to the next. That's why private contractors are such an important option for the federal government, in addition to its own publicly run facilities. So we are already in bed with the private prisons who already have invested, it would seem, whose stocks have gone up because they are waiting in the wings to build and close down detention centers as needed. In an earnings call Thursday, GEO Group Executive Chairman George Zolli said the company was built for this unique moment in our country's history and the opportunity that it will bring. Brian Evans, GEO Group's chief executive officer, said on the call, "We're looking at a theoretical potential doubling of all our services." On CoreCivic's recent earnings call, CEO Damon Hinninger noted that the company already has additional vacant beds in its systems that could be used to meet a post-election demand. "So we are taking proactive steps and working on a plan to activate and make available every single bed that we've got in the enterprise," Hinninger said. And again, that's about 18,000 beds. Okay.
So yesterday we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired four-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him.
Trump praises Nazi generals' loyalty to Hitler. Ex-Trump official, former U.S. Pres wanted Hitler-like loyal general. Debunked stories. To be fair, Trump's campaign denies allegations. Trump's political rival, Kamala Harris, reacts, calling him fascist. Donald Trump reportedly said he needed the kind of generals that Hitler had in private talks. The Atlantic reported Trump admired Hitler's loyal generals for their obedience and loyalty. Trump allegedly said, "Why can't you be like the German generals?" to John Kelly, his former chief of staff. Kelly claimed Trump wanted generals who would follow orders as Hitler's military officers did.
Hitler did some good things, said Donald Trump, according to his former chief of staff, John Kelly. Explosive reporting over the last 24 hours, building on much of what we already knew about Donald Trump based on prior allegations, and I'm going to go through it with you. Trump's former chief of staff says that Trump once said, Hitler did some good things. Let's listen to a recording of John Kelly explaining this.
He would commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason. And but he would occasionally say that.
What would he say when you would lay?
Okay. So Trump wanted generals like Hitler's. He wanted his generals to be like Hitler's generals. Let's look at one more leaked audio, and this is when a reporter asked him if he would consider having North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un come to the States. And here is what he had to say about that.
Are we close to seeing Mr. Kim here at the White House?
Could happen. I mean,
They talked about that yesterday
I would
with
have
Mike
him.
Pompeo?
Yeah, I think it's something that could happen. Yeah. Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he is the strong head. Don't let anyone think anything different.
Right.
He speaks, and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
Well,
Okay. He speaks, they sit up, attention, I want my people to do the same. Okay, so let us see if we have this straight. Trump idolizes Hitler. He wants generals that are like Hitler's who will do anything he asks them to do. He is setting up deportation camps. He is working with private companies to build more deportation camps. He wants to take entire families. Why? Because he doesn't want to leave any little brown children in the country. He wants them all gone. He wants all of this to happen, his mass deportations to happen, because he does not really want black or brown people in this country. He wants a white America. He wants a Christian nationalist America. Because of its qualitative populism, your fascism must be against rotten parliamentary governments. One of the first sentences uttered by Mussolini in the Italian parliament was, "I could have transformed this deaf and gloomy place into a bivouac for my maniples." So he wanted to take the parliament and turn it into the bivouac, like a non-tented military encampment for my maniples. And maniples are like a Roman legion. So maniples being a subdivision of the traditional Roman legion. As a matter of fact, he immediately found better housing for his maniples. But a little later, he liquidated the parliament. Wherever a politician casts doubt on the legitimacy of a parliament because it no longer represents the voice of the people, we can smell your fascism. So all of the things we just described, in one of the opinion pieces, the author said he cannot do all of these things legally and with the systems and the budgets that we have in place currently. The only way to do those things is to eliminate our current parliament. So our current government, get rid of everybody. Oh, I don't know, how do we do that? We fire thousands and thousands of people. We send Doge in with their little AI machine to just axe everything that has a keyword that their little AI system has put into place and axe all of those people. You know what else we'll do? We'll take all of the newest people who are still in their probationary period, because we can just axe them without even having to have a reason because they're still on probation, although there is some evidence that, yeah, you can't do that either. So what do? You get rid of all of the people who dissent. You put into place all of the people who don't give a shit if you are following the law. Or you know what else? We'll just rewrite the new laws. So let's put all people in Congress who will rewrite the laws to your favor. What do we have? We have fascism. I'm snarky positivity, which means I always end on a positive note. And my positive note is this. I think that there is one challenge that Trump has. He's following a fascist playbook from fascists who were trying to overtake little tiny companies in comparison to geography and population of the United States. And I think that he hasn't taken into consideration just how massive the government mechanism is in this country. Just how incredibly huge, which also means not only does he have a whole lot more to infiltrate, but he has a lot more dissenters. So I'm going to end with this positive note, this message from James Carville, who is a political analyst. And here is what he thinks is going to happen. And this was February 24th, which was 2 days ago. So very fresh. Take a listen to what James Carville has to say.
What I've said very publicly, Democrats need to play possum. This whole thing is collapsing. It doesn't need Elizabeth Warren and somebody screaming to pacify some progressive advocacy groups in Washington, which, by the way, I wish these people were just useless. They're actually worse than useless, that they're detrimental. And they never, ever learn to shut up. And so, Dan, this is what I believe. I believe that this administration, in less than 30 days, in the midst of a massive collapse, and particularly a collapse in public opinion. It's going to be easy pickings here in 6 weeks. Just lay back.
So you literally think 30 days to 6 weeks, the Trump administration is effectively going to collapse in terms of public support?
Well, it's collapsing right now. We're in the midst of a collapse. This is the lowest approval, not even close, that any president has ever had at a comparable time. Again, that's a provable fact. So they're not going to be able to get a debt extension. That's pretty clear. I don't think they're going to be able to pass reconciliation, but I'm not sure. But they're going to have to go to Hakeem. And that is going to be the equivalent of stacking arms. It's over.
Well, that's,
okay.
That is certainly...
I mean, this is Oslo. He's not happy that I'm working today. So the positive note is this. Nobody ever wants their government to fail. I am not saying I desire for the government to fail. I am suggesting that I would be okay if this administration fails at its current efforts to essentially to just group all of America into this people, this one voice, where he thinks that he is the voice of the people. And what he wants to do is get rid of all black and brown people in this country, all LGBTQ plus people, women. Women are dying faster now than they were before the Roe v. Wade was overturned. He wants to get rid of disabled people. Yeah, so he wants to get rid of anybody who's not him. So he is claiming to be the voice of the people, and he thinks because he wants it, he thinks everybody wants it. So my positive news is this: not everybody wants this, and there is such a delicious and strong resistance that's bubbling up, and people are not going to put up with this. I really, truly believe that. James Carville thinks it'll be done within 30 days. The whole thing is going to collapse. And what he was talking about, the collapse, not necessarily the collapse of the government, but the collapse of public opinion. So the people will no longer be behind the leader who is claiming to be the voice of the people. And after that, I don't know. I don't know what this is going to look like, but I'm in it for the long haul. I'm buckled in for this ride. I'm not leaving the country. I'm not going anywhere, but I am here for the fight. So thank you for hanging with me. If you like the content, please subscribe. I'm working to build up my subscriber base. I am Snarky Positivity. Okay, bye.